Welcome back, everyone. I'm really happy you're here. Thank you for choosing to spend a few minutes with me today. Before we begin, I have one small request. If you enjoy discovering history through relaxing stories like this, take a moment to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. It helps us create more stories for curious minds like yours, and it makes sure you never miss our next journey into the past. Now, get comfortable, take a deep breath, and let your imagination do the traveling. Have you ever looked at the shoes you're wearing and wondered where they came from? Not the store you bought them from, but their real beginning. Every object around us has a history, and some histories are far more surprising than we could ever imagine. High heels are a perfect example. Today, when most people think of high heels, they picture fashion shows, celebrities, elegant outfits, or expensive designer brands. But the truth is far more fascinating. High heels were not created for fashion, and they certainly were not created for women. Their story stretches back thousands of years. It crosses deserts, kingdoms, battlefields, royal palaces, and modern cities. Along the way, one simple invention changed its meaning again and again. So, come with me as we uncover the incredible journey of the high heel, where it began, who wore it first, and how it transformed from a practical tool into one of the world's most recognizable fashion symbols. This is Storium, where history comes alive, one story at a time. Our journey begins more than 3,000 years ago in one of the world's greatest civilizations, ancient Egypt. The land of Egypt was full of life. The mighty Nile River flowed through the desert, bringing water, food, and prosperity to millions of people. Busy markets echoed with the voices of merchants. Craftsmen shaped beautiful objects by hand, while farmers and laborers worked tirelessly under the warm Egyptian sun. If you had walked through those crowded streets, however, you might have noticed something unexpected. Not the towering pyramids or magnificent temples, but the shoes people were wearing. Some Egyptians wore footwear with a slightly raised sole, something that looked surprisingly similar to a small heel. But these early heels had nothing to do with style or beauty. The people who used them most were butchers. Their workplaces were often wet and messy, and standing directly on the ground was uncomfortable and unhygienic. By raising their feet just a little, these simple shoes helped keep them cleaner and drier throughout the day. It wasn't a fashion statement. It wasn't a symbol of wealth. It was simply a practical solution to an everyday problem. And that's what makes history so fascinating. Some of the world's greatest ideas don't begin in palaces or universities. They begin with ordinary people trying to solve ordinary problems. No one in ancient Egypt could have imagined that this simple raised sole would one day become one of the most famous fashion items in history. But that's exactly what happened. So let's continue our journey. Leaving the banks of the Nile behind, we now travel east, across deserts and mountains, to the mighty Persian Empire. Around the 1st century CE, Persia was home to some of the finest horsemen the world had ever seen. Persian cavalry was famous for its speed, discipline, and extraordinary skill in battle. Fighting on horseback demanded incredible balance. Archers often had to rise from their saddles while galloping at full speed, aiming arrows at enemies without losing control of their horses. To do that, they needed one important advantage. Their feet had to stay firmly locked inside the stirrups. That is where the heel became a brilliant piece of military technology. Persian soldiers began wearing boots with raised heels that caught securely in the stirrups. The design gave them greater stability, better balance, and more control while riding into battle. These boots weren't created to impress anyone. They weren't designed for luxury. They were designed to help soldiers survive, and they worked remarkably well. As Persian traders, diplomats, and soldiers traveled across continents, They carried more than goods and ideas. They also carried their style of dress. Little by little, the heeled riding boot found its way into Europe, like a seed carried by the wind. The idea spread from one kingdom to another until it reached the royal courts of Europe. And once it arrived there, everything changed. We are now in Europe during the 1500s, a world of magnificent castles, glittering royal courts, elaborate clothing, and ambitious kings determined to display their power. Europe was opening its doors to new cultures, and Persian fashion had become a symbol of sophistication, strength, and prestige. The noble families noticed, the kings noticed, and before long, they wanted heels for themselves. Europe in the 1500s, when heels became a symbol of power. When heeled shoes finally reached Europe, they took on a completely new meaning. Here's something that surprises many people. In Europe, high heels were first worn by men, not women. To the nobles and kings of the 1500s, heels were far more than footwear. They were a statement. Wearing heels told the world that you were wealthy, powerful, and important. A man in heels wasn't someone who worked long hours in muddy fields. He wasn't a laborer. He belonged to the royal court. He lived a life of privilege. Artists of the time captured this image perfectly. Portraits of kings, princes, and noblemen often showed them standing proudly in elegant clothing, wearing heeled shoes as a symbol of status and authority. No one embraced this fashion more than King Louis XIV of France, often called the Sun King. Although he wasn't very tall, he loved the extra height that heels gave him. His favorite shoes featured heels nearly 4 inches high, painted with bright red soles that made them impossible to ignore. But Louis didn't stop there. He declared that only members of the French nobility could wear red heels. Overnight, a simple shoe became an exclusive symbol of royal privilege. If you saw someone wearing red heels, you instantly knew they belonged to the highest level of society. By this point, heels had become much more than a practical invention. They had become a language, a silent way of saying, I have power, I have status, I belong among the elite. But history has a way of surprising us. Just as heels reached the height of male fashion, they began another remarkable transformation, the Great Shift, how heels became a women's fashion. As Europe entered the 1700s, the world began to change. A new way of thinking, known as the Age of Reason or the Enlightenment, encouraged people to value logic, science, and practicality over unnecessary luxury. Fashion reflected this change. Men gradually abandoned the colorful clothing, elaborate wigs, and high heels that had once defined nobility. Simpler outfits and flat shoes became signs of intelligence, professionalism, and seriousness. But while men were stepping away from heels, women were beginning to embrace them. Fashion for women became increasingly elegant and decorative. Dresses grew more elaborate, fabrics became richer, and heels evolved alongside them. They became slimmer, taller, and more refined, eventually turning into symbols of grace, beauty, and femininity. It's one of history's greatest ironies. The same heel that had once helped soldiers balance on horseback, a practical tool designed for war, was now admired as a delicate fashion accessory associated with elegance. Its purpose had completely changed. Of course, not everyone welcomed this transformation. Critics argued that high heels were uncomfortable, unhealthy, and even dangerous. Others believed they restricted women's freedom and encouraged unrealistic beauty standards. Those debates never truly disappeared. Generation after generation continued asking the same question: are high heels empowering or are they limiting? Even today, people still disagree. And as we move into the 20th century, that conversation becomes even more fascinating. The 20th century, the rise of the stiletto, The 20th century transformed the world faster than almost any period in history. 2 world wars reshaped nations. Women entered the workforce in greater numbers, fought for equal rights, and gained new independence. Naturally, fashion evolved alongside these enormous social changes. Then came one invention that would redefine high heels forever. In the 1950s, French designer Roger Vivier, working with the legendary fashion house Christian Dior, introduced a modern stiletto heel. Unlike the thicker heels of earlier centuries, the stiletto was incredibly slim, almost as thin as a needle. It was elegant, dramatic, and instantly recognizable. It made the legs appear longer, the posture straighter, and every step more graceful. Women around the world fell in love with it. Before long, the stiletto became one of the most iconic fashion designs ever created. Hollywood played a huge role in its popularity. Movie stars like Marilyn Monroe wore stilettos on screen, during photo shoots, and in everyday life. She once joked that she didn't know who invented high heels, but that women owed that person a great deal. People laughed because by then, high heels had become much more than shoes. They had become a cultural symbol. Fashion designers pushed the idea even further. Manolo Blahnik, Christian Louboutin, and Jimmy Choo transformed high heels into luxury works of art. Louboutin's famous red soles even echoed the red heels once reserved for King Louis XIV and the French nobility centuries earlier. History had quietly come full circle. What had once been a symbol of royal power for kings had become a symbol of confidence, elegance, and self-expression for millions of women around the world. The modern conversation: what do high heels mean today? Today, high heels are everywhere. At the same time, they are questioned more than ever before. For some women, wearing heels is empowering. They feel taller, more confident, and more elegant. For others, heels are uncomfortable, impractical, and unnecessary. They choose comfort over tradition and see no reason to wear them. Interestingly, heels are no longer associated with women alone. In fashion, music, and popular culture, many men have begun wearing heels again, not as a symbol of royalty, but as a way to express individuality, creativity, and identity. Designers now create heels in every imaginable style. High heels, low heels, block heels, platform heels, and shoes crafted from wood, leather, metal, plastic, and even glass. Around the world, opinions continue to differ. Some workplaces still expect women to wear heels as part of dress code, while other countries have introduced laws to prevent employers from making such requirements. One thing, however, has never changed. High heels have always been more than shoes. They tell stories about power, about wealth, about beauty, about identity, about freedom, and sometimes about sacrifice. That tiny raised piece beneath the foot has carried thousands of years of history. People continue to wear heels. Designers continue to reinvent them. And society continues to debate what they represent. Because fashion has never been just about what we wear. It has always been a reflection of who we are and of the world we live in. Fashion is much more than the clothes we wear. It tells stories without speaking. Every style, every design, and every trend reflects the people, cultures, and ideas of its time. And among all the symbols fashion has created, the high heel remains one of the most fascinating. It has carried the weight of history for thousands of years, changing its meaning with every generation. As our journey comes to an end, take a moment to think about how incredible this story really is. We began in the ancient land of Egypt, where a simple raised shoe helped butchers keep their feet clean while they worked. From there, we traveled to Persia, where skilled horsemen turned the heel into a practical tool for warfare, helping them stay balanced in the saddle during battle. Our journey then led us to the royal courts of Europe, where kings and noblemen proudly wore heels as symbols of wealth, power, and prestige. Over time, those same heels transformed once again, leaving the world of soldiers and kings behind to become one of the most recognizable symbols of elegance and fashion. Today, the story continues. High heels are admired by some, questioned by others, and constantly reimagined by designers around the world. What began as a simple solution to an everyday problem has become a powerful symbol of identity, culture, confidence, and self-expression. And perhaps that's the greatest lesson history teaches us. Even the most ordinary objects can have extraordinary stories. They evolve with society, take on new meanings, and quietly reflect the changes happening all around us. A single pair of shoes can tell us about war, royalty, art, fashion, and even the changing roles of men and women throughout history. If you're learning English, you've accomplished something meaningful today. You didn't just learn new vocabulary. You followed a story that stretched across thousands of years. Along the way, you explored history, discovered new ideas, and practiced listening to natural English in the most enjoyable way possible, through storytelling. That's what Storyum is all about. Every story is more than just a lesson. It's an invitation to travel through time, explore different cultures, and see the world from a new perspective. With every episode, your English grows stronger, your curiosity grows deeper, and another chapter of history comes to life. If you enjoyed today's journey, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below and tell me what surprised you the most. Was there a moment in this story that completely changed the way you think about high heels? And if there's another historical mystery or fascinating topic you'd like us to explore, let me know. Your ideas might inspire our next adventure. If this story made you smile, taught you something new, or helped you practice your English, please support the channel by subscribing, giving this video a like, and sharing it with someone who enjoys history, storytelling, or learning English. Every bit of your support helps us create more stories like this. Thank you for spending your time with me today. Thank you for learning. And most of all, thank you for being part of the Storyum community. Until we meet again, stay curious, keep learning, and never stop exploring the remarkable stories hidden in the everyday things around us. I'll see you in the next story.